The number one issue facing this country is the debt and the deficits. There's no question about it. And, as you know, this government in its 1.5 years of existence, this present government, isn't just the biggest deficit in history. It's more than the previous total accumulated debt in the history of the United States. And the bill is going to be paid by our children. And it damages the economy in certain particular ways. Certainly, it sucks money out of the economy because the debt has to be serviced. And it sucks that money out in the form of taxes, both in terms of individual taxes and business taxes. With that loss of available cash in the economy, businesses can't invest, they don't build plants, they don't do research and development, and they don't hire. And when you have that loss, those businesses become less competitive to businesses that are overseas, and you begin to have a spiral of failure in your business world. Similarly, the government is not going to have cash to make its investments, and it invests in infrastructure, roads, airports, trains, energy supplies. It doesn't have the money to invest in the military. It doesn't have the money to invest in higher education and in certain science projects. And evidence of that is that we've already sort of begun to lose our space program because of this process. So these deficits have to be not just a stoppage in the growth of these deficits, they have to be aggressively attacked immediately in Washington. So going up there, it's not enough to stop the growth. And there are certain things that we can do relatively quickly in terms of trying to get at this. Number one, there is money left over from both TARP and the stimulus bill. That money doesn't get spent except to pay down the deficit, number one. Number two, nothing goes through the House of Representatives, and that includes conciliation with the Senate if it has an earmark on it. Nothing. Every spending bill needs to have a sunset provision built in it, any spending bill, which means that over a finite period of time, usually 1 or 2 years, that bill has to be renewed by a vote in the House before it gets passed on as a way of controlling costs. All righty? We also need to, I would suspect that we have no new spending at all on any discretionary projects until the debt is brought down. And then we also have to remember that one of the biggest cost centers in the government is the executive branch. All these big departments, whether it's Education Department, Environment, HUD, any of them, has an enormous bloated bureaucracy with employees now that have benefits that are 77% greater than the same job done in the private sector. If I had, my druthers, if I was, king for a day, I wouldn't be telling the president, who's the head of the executive branch, which departments to close. But I would be saying to him, listen, pal, you have 20% less money to run the executive branch. You figure out whether you want to cut each department by 20% or you want to roll, for example, education into HUD or energy into commerce. But you have 20% less dollars to spend on the executive branch. And those are some of the ways that we get to not just chip away, but take pieces out of the deficit.